Focus on China. Vice President Mike Pence delivers a much-anticipated speech on the Trump administration's policy on Beijing. Careful counter-arguments. Republicans continue to defend President Trump amid the impeachment investigation. We have the latest. A final farewell. People gather in the nation's capital to honor Representative Elijah Cummings. And disability awareness. A church leader tells us about an initiative to celebrate those with special needs. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, October 24th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Vice President Mike Pence calls out China for human rights abuses and says the Trump administration will stand for religious liberty. He also calls on Beijing to respect nonviolent protesters in Hong Kong. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports on the highly anticipated speech. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. Vice President Mike Pence says much of the destiny of the 21st century relies on the U.S.-China relationship. That relationship is being tested right now. The Trump administration wants to level the playing field by protecting freedoms like the freedom of religion.
Millions of ethnic and religious minorities in China are struggling against the party's efforts to eradicate their religious and cultural identities. The Communist Party in China has arrested Christian pastors, banned the sale of Bibles, demolished churches, and imprisoned more than 1 million Muslim Uyghurs.
Vice President Pence also blames China for trying to curtail the rights and liberties of people living in Hong Kong. He says President Trump has made it clear it would be hard to make a trade deal with China if it resorts to violence against peaceful protesters in Hong Kong.
To the millions in Hong Kong who have been peacefully demonstrating to protect your rights these past months, we stand with you.
The Vice President also says the U.S. will engage with China with the goal of achieving the full, final, verifiable denuclearization of North Korea. Vice President Pence also called out Nike and the NBA by name today, saying too many American businesses have kowtowed to the lure of China money by abandoning American values and going along with Chinese censorship. He says a corporate culture that willfully ignores the abuse of human rights is repressive.
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thanks, Mark. Senator Lindsey Graham is introducing a resolution condemning the Democrat-controlled impeachment investigation.
We have a resolution urging the House to adopt the same procedures that Clinton and Nixon had available to them to call witnesses, defend themselves. You got to remember that the House voted on an impeachment inquiry and it failed.
Graham calls the investigation illegitimate. The Senate's top Republican, Mitch McConnell, is a co-sponsor. Joining me now to offer his perspective is John Gizzi, chief political columnist and White House correspondent for Newsmax. John, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Wyatt. Always a pleasure.
The resolution is non-binding, but it gives Senate Republicans a chance to at least show their support for President Trump. What do you make of the timing of all of this, and how important is it for the president to shore up support, even with his own party?
It comes on the heels of a poll in the New York Times showing that in New York, of all places, support for impeachment is dissipating and opposition to it is growing. This is the respected Siena College poll. And I would have to say that making their move at this time, the Senate is drawing a line in the sand, such as saying, don't send this over here or we're going to boot it right out of the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And that may well be the beginning of the end for impeachment. Remember, Nancy Pelosi was not enthusiastic at all about this and did a 180 degrees under pressure from some of the younger and, shall we say, more vocal members of her conference.
Earlier today, President Trump tweeted his thanks to House Republicans. Several of them tried to gain entry to a closed-door deposition yesterday and actually brought the proceedings to a halt. What's your reaction for the Republicans in the House call for more transparency of the inquiry process? Is there a need for that?
Well, I think there certainly should be a need for both parties participating in it. All it does for the Democrats is fuel the president's argument that this is a kangaroo court. And when joint hearings are held with both parties present, that totally ends the charge of the presidents about partisanship and a kangaroo court. Why it's proceeding with closed-door depositions, I truly don't know.
Yeah, it's because it has a lot of people asking the same question. Another important item for the president, switching gears here a little bit, is Syria. Yesterday, the president declared a U.S. brokered ceasefire between Turkey and the Kurds in that area, quote, a big success. How was all this playing with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle?
It's not playing well with Republicans, who normally are solidly behind their president, and it certainly is coming across as a bad remake of The Producers for the Democrats. The fact is that the Kurds have a loyal following on Capitol Hill. They are considered almost the way the Founding Fathers considered the supporters that they had from France and other countries. And when the Kurds suddenly have the soldiers who fought side by side with them, there's a little bit of anger on the Republican side, a lot of anger on the Democratic side. And it was only a year ago, speaking at the UN, President Trump singled out the Kurds. He nicknamed a reporter Mr. Kurd, in fact, and said the Kurds have fought with us and died for us. And to many, this seems a total reversal of his previous stand.
It's very interesting how it's a divisive issue, not just on Capitol Hill, but of course in the Middle East as well.
Absolutely.
John Gizzi, chief political columnist and White House correspondent for Newsmax. Always appreciate your analysis.
And thank you for having me, Wyatt. It's always a pleasure to be here.
An appeals court has ruled against the Little Sisters of the Poor. The Catholic religious order had received a legal exemption from the federal contraception mandate, but a second appeals court has now struck down that exemption. The Little Sisters are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene. The mandate requires employers to pay for health insurance that covers contraception and some abortion drugs. For more on this story, including why the order was given an exemption in the first place, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Today is United Nations Day, and earlier this week, the Senate confirmed a new U.S. representative to the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. The appointment of Andrew Bremberg drew praise from pro-lifers. They say Bremberg will be a strong advocate for the unborn. Planned Parenthood criticized the appointment. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he has a way to settle the impasse over Britain's exit from the European Union.
The way to get Brexit done is, I think, to be reasonable with Parliament and say if they genuinely want more time to study this excellent deal, they can have it, but they have to agree to a general election.
Johnson says the potential election would happen in December. Lawmakers will vote on the proposal on Monday. Another round of violence between police and protesters in Chile. Authorities fired tear gas and used a water cannon to control the crowds. The unrest started last week after an increase in subway fares. It has ballooned into the country's worst crisis in years. Pope Francis yesterday prayed for an end to the bloodshed in the Catholic country. Spain has exhumed the remains of General Francisco Franco. His body was moved from the mausoleum outside Madrid to a small family crypt north of the city. Many in Spain considered the mausoleum to be an insult to the hundreds of thousands of people who died in Spain's civil war in the 1930s. At the family's request, a brief prayer was said before his body was taken away. Authorities in Bangladesh are going to start relocating thousands of Rohingya refugees. The migrants will be moved to an island in the Bay of Bengal. Currently, they are in camps near the border with Myanmar. The relocations will start in late November or early December. More than 1 million Rohingya currently live in Bangladesh. The Synod on the Amazon is coming to a close, giving church leaders meeting in Rome 3 more days to share their testimonies on the South American region.
A nossa contribuição para a ecologia integral não é tanto.
An archbishop from Brazil's lower Amazon region is one of the dozens of church leaders meeting for the past 3 weeks on how the church can provide the best pastoral and environmental care to the area. Pope Francis expressed the importance of many of the same issues when he wrote Laudato Si', an encyclical reflecting on the relationship between humans and the environment. Father Jostrom Isaac Curry-Tatum, coordinator for the Ecology and Creation sector of the Vatican's Department for Promoting Integral Human Development, joins us now from Rome. Father, thank you so much for being with us. Some church leaders have expressed concern that since Laudato Si', the encyclical, was published, there hasn't really been any follow-up. How is the church concretely using the teachings from Laudato Si' around the world?
Yeah, it's a very relevant question. I mean, Laudato Si' is indeed a landmark document from Pope Francis. And my own experience, our own experience at the dicastery, where I coordinate the sector on ecology and creation, is that sometimes this beautiful document is known, perhaps sometimes more outside the church than within. So one of our primary tasks in the dicastery is to make Laudato Si' known within the church, and not just at the level of knowledge, but the concern is to put Laudato Si' into practice. And I would see the Amazon Synod is probably an example of this concern of Pope Francis and of the entire church, of taking care of our common home, and beginning with a very precarious area, the Amazon, and beginning with a set of communities probably among the greatest victims of the ecological degradation. So I would sort of see the Amazon Synod as an event that helps Laudato Si' to come alive.
Well, Father, that sort of leads into my next question. Why should someone in other parts of the world, far away from the Amazon, be concerned with the Amazon region?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I suppose it's a question that pops up in the minds of many people. Now, I think the clue is in the very subtitle of the encyclical on care for our common home, and which means Earth is one home. In 1968, for the first time, we had the image, the photograph of the Earth from space, the Apollo mission, and what we call Earthrise, showing that Earth is one planet, was one home, like where everything is connected. And ecological, environmental sciences tell us that in nature, everything is connected, the ecosystem, the water cycle, the carbon cycle. So what affects in one part of the world physically does affect another part of the world. We are there as one common family. And in a family, when something happens to someone, it affects the entire family.
Father, you had mentioned the indigenous people. How can the church evangelize in different cultures, different parts of the world, while remaining faithful to church teachings?
Yeah, very, very good question. Now, it exactly what we mean is, what do we mean by evangelization? And that takes us to the word evangelion, that's in Greek, which means good news. And interestingly, the second chapter of the encyclical Laudato Si' carries this title called The Gospel of Creation, that the entire creation is good news. It's God's revelation. So evangelization is taking this good news. And again, if you go to, it always struck me, the last words of Jesus in Mark chapter 16, that's the last chapter, and verse 15, Jesus' commandment to the apostles, to the disciples, go and preach the gospel to the whole of creation. I think that's probably one thing we have forgotten. We have forgotten to preach the gospel, the evangelion of creation to the whole of good news, to every creature.
So many important messages there, and obviously important topics that are being brought up at the Synod. Father Jostrom Isaac Curry-Tatum with the Vatican Department for Promoting Integral Human Development. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and God bless your work, and please keep up. Thank you very much.
Coming up, Colorado's Attorney General releases a report on clergy sexual abuse, and saying goodbye to Maryland Representative Elijah Cummings. The Attorney General of Colorado says more than 160 children in the state were sexually abused by Catholic priests.
During this process, the Catholic Church has worked with us, worked with a special master, worked with Ken Feinberg to do justice, to make sure that victims are heard, are provided compensation, and that those who engaged in this heinous conduct are called out.
The report found 43 priests were guilty of misconduct over 70 years. Most of the allegations were from the 1960s and 70s. The probe also says the state's 3 Catholic dioceses spent decades attempting to cover up the abuse. Americans are saying goodbye to a long-serving congressman today. The body of Elijah Cummings lies in state at the U.S. Capitol. It's a rare honor given only to 31 other Americans, including Abraham Lincoln. Capitol Hill correspondent Ytsync-en gives us a look at the legacy of the Maryland Democrat.
Elijah Cummings walked these steps for more than 20 years. Today, one final trip to the U.S. Capitol.
If I can do my duty.
His body rests on the same platform used for the body of Abraham Lincoln.
May God keep and protect our friend and colleague Elijah Cummings. Here on earth, we will miss him. The House will miss him. Maya, you and your family and his friends will miss him. And America will miss him.
And he's honored by Democrats and Republicans.
Perhaps this place and this country would be better served with a few more unexpected friendships. I know I've been blessed by one. God bless you.
For just one moment, these power-packed halls of Congress are quiet. This is where Elijah Cummings represented the people of Baltimore and the suburbs, and today they mourn his loss. And a similar honor outside the doors of the committee he chaired, Oversight and Reform, where his voice boomed.
What does that mean?
Americans remember that voice and the man behind it.
But just to know someone of his stature that came from the same dirt that we came from, was able to bring such a great position in life.
Cummings was a civil rights leader. He helped bring healing after Baltimore erupted in riots in 2015. He did back abortion with a 100% rating with NARAL. He also investigated the Trump administration. Still, his political opponents say goodbye.
He was my member of Congress, and he did represent the district for 23 years. That's pretty impressive. So it was important for me to pay respects to the man.
Elijah Cummings died last week of complications from long-standing health problems. He was 68 years old. At the Capitol, Ytsync-en, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, a church leader has a message about the importance of those with special needs. Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, the March for Life's Jeannie Mancini discusses the theme for the 47th annual event, Life Empowers, Pro-Life is Pro-Woman.
These two things do go hand in glove, that to be pro-woman means to celebrate all of the different aspects, including our ability to have children.
The March for Life will take place January 24th, 2020. To see more of the interview with guest host Debbie Cowden, watch tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. Visit EWTN.com for other airing times. A Catholic bishop reminds us those among us with special needs are a central part of, quote, who we are and what we do as a community. He's working to expand special education programs within his diocese. At a recent Mass for persons with disabilities, Bishop Michael Burbidge of the Diocese of Arlington told the faithful, students with special needs who attend our schools, quote, show others the face of Christ and bring out the best in all of us. Bishop Michael Burbidge of the Diocese of Arlington in Virginia joins me now in studio. Your Excellency, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Wyatt.
Most people may not know this about you, but you actually have several degrees related to education. Tell me what inspired you to sort of have this emphasis on people with special needs?
Well, especially this month that we're celebrating Respect Life, we're reminded of that truth that we proclaim so often, that all of us are created uniquely in the very image and likeness of God. And that includes all persons. And as a Catholic church and our Catholic parishes and schools, we want to make sure that our arms are well open to embrace all of God's children.
What are schools in your diocese, the Diocese of Arlington, doing to help and welcome those with special needs? And how in doing that, how does that make a difference for families?
I am very inspired with our schools. 14 of our schools, including all 4 of our high schools, have what we call an inclusion program for those with learning disabilities and gifts, where they are not just provided a section of the school. Our students are integrated in every aspect of the school. They walk side by side with all the other students, and to see that is so inspirational. And it, as I said, it brings out the best in all of us. We are the ones who benefit from the gifts that these students bring to us, and they call us to respond with the compassion and the love that Christ taught us.
What kind of feedback do you get from parents?
The parents are so grateful. You know, we always say that our parents are the first teachers of their children, especially in the ways of faith. And our parents who have students with special needs and learning disabilities, to feel that they have that support from our parishes and from our schools is a great help to them, and they are filled with such thanks to our teachers and our volunteers who participate in the programs.
And with these programs, tell me again, because you touched on this, but I want to expand it further. What message are you hoping to send out about this idea of human dignity, the value of every human life? Because it seems like, and what you were saying before about integrating that, people with special needs, people who don't necessarily have special needs, all together as one.
Right. So all of us are called to show the face of Christ to others. And when we look at another person, we should be able to see the face of Christ, and they should be able to see the face of Christ in us. And so in our programs, embracing students who are bringing so many gifts to us, experiencing from us that sense of welcome, that accompaniment, is such a help to them, and it brings such a wonderful spirit to our schools, and that's why it's a goal in our diocese where every school will have this. And I'm so proud of our Catholic educators who are embracing this, not as a challenge, but as a privileged moment for us to do something like this.
What are your hopes for growth of the programs moving forward? And do you think other dioceses are beginning to pick up on similar programs?
Yeah, I do. I think so. And, you know, there is a partnership involved. We work closely with other organizations that will help provide the Knights of Columbus, Porto Charities. They help to provide grants to schools who want to do this. So, you know, this kind of commitment, such resources are needed. And no school is asked, or parish is asked to do this alone. There has to be a partnership, and we're very, very happy to have that kind of support to help us achieve this goal.
Well, it's so interesting to hear about your programs. It's always interesting, of course, to hear how this starts at the grassroots level, if you will, at the individual church level, and can spread in other dioceses across the country. Bishop Michael Burbidge of the Diocese of Arlington, thank you so much for coming on, and of course, for sharing an important message with our audience.
Thank you, Wyatt.
And with that, we conclude our newscast for tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.